A European explorer crawls through knee-deep snow, his fingers black with frostbite, death creeping closer with each frozen breath. Just 50 yards away, native children laugh and play in the same deadly cold. How is this even possible? Imagine waking up in a Lakota winter camp. Outside, the wind screams across the Dakota plains at minus 40 degrees. Ice crystals slice through the air like tiny knives. Your breath would freeze solid before it leaves your mouth. This is the kind of cold that kills unprepared humans in minutes. But here's the thing. You're not dying. You're not even cold. You're sitting comfortably in a buffalo hide lodge, watching a grandmother tell stories to wide-eyed children. The fire crackles in the center, casting dancing shadows on painted walls. Women work on intricate beadwork while men repair arrows for tomorrow's hunt. The smell of roasted meat fills the warm air. This isn't a scene from a movie. This was reality for thousands of Native American families who turned winter from humanity's greatest enemy into their closest ally. For centuries, we've been told the wrong story about Native Americans and winter. Hollywood shows us people huddled in flimsy shelters, barely surviving until spring. History books paint winter as a time of starvation and death. But archaeology tells a completely different tale. These communities didn't just survive winter, they thrived in it. While European settlers froze to death in their log cabins, native families stayed warm in temperatures that would challenge modern military equipment. While colonists ran out of food by February, indigenous peoples feasted on carefully stored supplies that could last until spring. How did they do it? The answer lies in thousands of years of innovation, passed down from grandmother to granddaughter, from father to son. These weren't lucky survivors. They were master engineers who solved problems that still challenge us today. Meet Butterfly, a young Mandan woman living along the Missouri River in 1805. As Lewis and Clark shiver in their flimsy tents outside her village, she's working comfortably inside her family's earth lodge, in nothing but a light dress. The temperature outside? Minus 43 degrees. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, wrote William Clark in his journal. These lodges are so warm that the people go about half naked while we can barely survive in our heaviest coats. Butterfly's home was an engineering masterpiece. Imagine a dome 40 feet across, covered in 3 feet of packed earth. 4 massive cottonwood posts held up a framework of willow branches. The entrance tunnel sloped downward, creating a cold trap that kept frigid air from entering the living space. But the real genius was invisible. The lodge worked like a giant thermos bottle. The thick earth walls stored heat during the day and slowly released it at night. Small gaps near the floor pulled in fresh air, while a carefully positioned smoke hole created a draft that carried away stale air and smoke. The result? A house that stayed 60 degrees warmer inside than outside, heated by nothing more than a small central fire. Dr. George Will studied these lodges in the early 1900s and was amazed. The thermal efficiency rivals modern buildings, he noted, and they built them with stone tools and human labor. But Butterfly's people weren't alone in their mastery. 2,000 miles north, an Inuit hunter named Siku faced an even deadlier challenge. Caught in a sudden Arctic blizzard, he had minutes to live. The wind chill hit minus 80 degrees, rains cold enough to freeze exposed skin in 30 seconds. What Siku did next would save his life and amaze modern survival experts. Using only a snow knife, he began cutting blocks from wind-packed snow. Within 2 hours, he had built a perfect dome. It would become his home until the storm passed. Inside his snow house, heated only by his body warmth and a small oil lamp, Siku stayed comfortable at 40 degrees above zero while the blizzard raged outside at minus 60. It defies logic, says Dr. Gideon Liston, who studies Arctic survival. Snow is cold, right? But in the hands of an expert, it becomes the perfect insulation material. The secret lay in snow's structure. Wind-packed snow contains millions of tiny air pockets, nature's own foam insulation. Cut properly and stacked in a dome shape, these blocks created a shelter stronger than many modern buildings. Siku's igloo had another trick. The inside surface, warmed by body heat, developed a thin glaze of ice that actually strengthened the walls while preventing them from melting. Fresh air entered through small holes near the floor and exited through gaps at the top, creating perfect ventilation. One hunter, armed with a traditional knowledge, had turned the deadliest material on Earth into a 5-star hotel. If these incredible survival stories are blowing your mind, imagine what's coming next. We're just getting started on this journey into Native American winter mastery. Hit that like button if you're learning something new, and subscribe because the most incredible secrets are still ahead. Now, staying warm wasn't just about good housing. It was about understanding your own body like a biological machine. Take Ayana, a Cherokee woman preparing for her first winter as a new mother. She faced a terrifying challenge, keeping a newborn alive in temperatures that regularly dropped below zero. One mistake could kill her baby. Ayana had something more powerful than modern heating systems. She had knowledge passed down through generations of mothers. First, the clothing. Forget everything you think you know about Native American dress. Ayana's winter outfit was a carefully engineered system that would impress modern outdoor gear designers. Against her skin, soft rabbit fur, worn with the fur side in. The hollow hairs trapped warm air while wicking moisture away from her body. Over this, a dress made from deer hide, tanned with the brain until it was soft as silk but tough as leather. On top, a buffalo robe with the fur still on, worn hair side out to shed snow and rain. The hide was smoked until it was completely waterproof. Her feet were protected by moccasins with multiple layers, an inner sock of rabbit fur, the moccasin itself, and an outer covering of waterproof buffalo hide. But the real secret was in how these layers worked together. Like a high-tech sleeping bag, the system trapped warm air while allowing moisture to escape. Ayana could work outside in sub-zero temperatures and never get cold or wet. For her baby, she had an even more ingenious solution. The cradle board. Lined with soft rabbit fur and cattail down, it created a personal microclimate for her child. Carried close to her body, the baby stayed warm, even in the coldest weather. Modern military researchers study these designs. The thermal efficiency is remarkable, notes Dr. Sarah Chen, who develops cold weather gear for special forces. They achieved performance that we struggle to match with synthetic materials. But staying warm was only half the battle. How do you feed a family when the land is buried under 4 feet of snow for 6 months? Enter Joseph Crow Feather, a Lakota elder whose grandmother survived the brutal winter of 1886. The year white settlers called the Great Die-Up because so many cattle froze to death. While ranchers lost everything, Crow Feather's family feasted. Their secret weapon? Pemmican. This wasn't just jerky. Pemmican was a carefully engineered superfood that could last for years without spoiling. Lean buffalo meat was dried until brittle, then pounded into powder. This was mixed with rendered fat and berries to create a paste that contained everything the human body needed to survive. 1 pound of pemmican equals 5 pounds of fresh meat in nutrition, explains food historian Dr. Samuel Deloria. It's like an ancient energy bar, but better. A single family might store 500 pounds of pemmican for winter, enough to feed them for months. But they had other tricks too. Cache pits dug into hillsides stored corn, beans, and squash. The 3 sisters, as they were called, provided complete nutrition when eaten together. Wild rice, gathered in autumn, could be stored for years. Maple sugar, boiled down from tree sap, provided concentrated calories. But perhaps most ingeniously, many tribes continued hunting throughout winter. The Ojibwe developed fish traps that worked beneath solid ice. They would cut holes in frozen lakes and set elaborate underwater snares that caught fish while the hunters stayed warm in their lodges. In the forests, deer became easier to track in snow. Hunters on snowshoes could pursue animals that bogged down in deep drifts. Winter actually provided better hunting than summer in many areas. In the depths of a brutal Minnesota winter, Little Wolf's infant daughter burned with fever. Snow lay 8 feet deep outside their Ojibwe lodge. The nearest trading post was 200 miles away. Modern medicine didn't exist. Yet Little Wolf wasn't panicking. He knew exactly what to do. From his carefully maintained winter medicine bundle, he removed strips of willow bark. These had been harvested in autumn when the healing compounds were strongest, then dried and stored for exactly this moment. He brewed the bark into tea, creating aspirin centuries before Europeans discovered it. Within hours, his daughter's fever broke. Native American winter medicine was a sophisticated pharmaceutical system that could treat everything from pneumonia to frostbite, using only what nature provided. Each tribe developed specialized knowledge of their local ecosystem's healing properties. The Cherokee identified over 400 medicinal plants that remained effective even when frozen. Echinacea roots, dug before the first frost, boosted immune systems through long winters. Pine needle tea prevented scurvy with massive doses of vitamin C. Bear grease mixed with specific herbs created antiseptic salves that could heal wounds that would otherwise turn gangrenous in cold weather. But perhaps most remarkably, they understood prevention better than cure. Sweat lodges weren't just spiritual practices. They were sophisticated detoxification systems that purged toxins and boosted immunity before winter illnesses could take hold. Their pharmacological knowledge was encyclopedic, notes ethnobotanist Dr. Kelly Kincher. They could create targeted treatments that modern medicine is only now beginning to understand. Winter darkness was humanity's first psychological enemy. When the sun disappears for months and temperatures make outdoor activity deadly, the human mind can shatter. But native communities turned this challenge into their greatest strength. Consider the Inuit concept of Arctic hysteria. What outsiders saw as mental breakdown from isolation and cold. But to the Inuit, these weren't breakdowns. They were spiritual transformations, carefully guided by elders who understood the mind's response to extreme conditions. Their solution? Storytelling marathons that could last for days. During the longest nights, their communities would gather for story cycles that stretched human memory to its limits. The tales weren't just entertainment, they were cognitive exercises that kept minds sharp and spirits strong. Drumming, singing, and dancing provided both physical activity and emotional release. Games of skill maintained hand-eye coordination critical for survival. Complex crafts like intricate beadwork or carving gave people projects that could occupy minds for months. They understood what we now call seasonal affective disorder, explains psychologist Dr. Norman Rosenthal. Their solutions were often more effective than our modern light therapy. The Lakota winter counts, pictographic calendars painted on buffalo hides, served as both historical records and community bonding exercises. Elders would spend weeks teaching young people to read and interpret the symbols, creating shared cultural memory that strengthened group identity during isolation. But all of this winter mastery began months before the first snowfall. Summer and autumn weren't just about gathering food. They were intensive preparation periods where communities worked with military precision to ready themselves for the siege ahead. Among the Hidatsa along the Missouri River, preparation began in early summer. Women organized massive corn-drying operations, creating elevated platforms where thousands of ears could be processed simultaneously. The dried kernels were stored in underground caches lined with grass and sealed with clay. Natural refrigerators that could preserve food for years. Men spent autumn hunting not just for meat, but for materials. A single buffalo provided food, clothing, tools, and shelter materials. Every part had a purpose. Sinew for thread, bones for tools, hide for clothing and lodge covers, hooves for glue, hair for rope. But the Hidatsa had a secret weapon. They planned for failure. Multiple cache sites spread across their territory meant that if one was discovered by enemies or destroyed by floods, others remained. Redundancy built into every system ensured survival, even when disaster struck. The Menominee developed perhaps the most sophisticated preparation system of all. Their name literally means wild rice people, so their entire culture revolved around the annual rice harvest that would sustain them through winter. Families maintained multiple rice beds across thousands of square miles, ensuring that if weather destroyed crops in one area, others would survive. The harvest itself was a complex operation requiring canoes, specialized tools, and knowledge of exactly when each bed would be ready. But they didn't stop at rice. Maple sugaring in early spring provided concentrated calories. Berry gathering in summer added vitamins. Hunting and fishing continued year-round, with specific techniques for each season. Winter isolation could kill communities as surely as cold or starvation, but native peoples developed technologies of communication that connected villages across vast distances even in the deepest cold. The most sophisticated winter communication network in North America. Runners on snowshoes carried messages between villages hundreds of miles apart. These weren't casual messages. They were vital intelligence about weather, game movements, and threats that could mean life or death for entire communities. The runners themselves were athletes whose training began in childhood. They could cover 50 miles in a day through deep snow, following trail markers invisible to untrained eyes. Their routes connected not just villages, but created a continental network that stretched from the Atlantic to the Great Lakes. Smoke signals, adapted for winter conditions, used different materials that would show against snowy skies. Mirror signals reflected winter sun across frozen landscapes. Even drumbeats, carried further in cold air, became part of the communication web. But perhaps most ingeniously, they developed a system of winter markets. Large gatherings held during midwinter broke the isolation while allowing communities to trade not just goods, but information and expertise. On the longest, coldest nights, when the wind howled like demons outside, something magical happened in native lodges. Families gathered around fires as elders began to speak. These weren't just bedtime stories. They were libraries, vast databases of survival knowledge disguised as entertainment. Old Man Coyote stories taught children which plants were edible. Tales of Thunderbird explained weather patterns that could save lives. Stories of the first people contained detailed instructions for everything from building shelters to predicting storms. The stories were our books, explains Dr. Gregory Kahete, a Tiwa scholar. In a world without writing, narrative was how we preserved and transmitted thousands of years of accumulated wisdom. Children who mastered these stories carried enough knowledge to survive anything winter could throw at them. The tales weren't just education, they were insurance policies for the entire tribe. Some stories were so precisely crafted they served as navigation systems. Epic tales describing landscape features, seasonal changes, and landmark locations allowed people to travel hundreds of miles through trackless wilderness using only memorized narratives. But this mastery came at a price. When European diseases swept through native populations, killing 90% of some tribes, the knowledge began to die with the elders. When children were forced into boarding schools and forbidden to speak their languages, the stories were lost. When buffalo herds were systematically slaughtered and tribes were confined to reservations, the old ways became impossible. Winter, which had been a season of craftsmanship, storytelling, and community, became what outsiders always thought it was: a time of struggle and hardship. Today, as climate change brings more extreme weather, we're rediscovering Native American winter wisdom. Modern architects study earth lodge designs for energy-efficient buildings. Military researchers examine traditional clothing systems. Survivalists learn ancient food preservation techniques. The Inuit knowledge of snow and ice helps scientists understand Arctic conditions. Traditional hunting and fishing methods inform wildlife management. The stories now being recorded and preserved offer insights into sustainable living. NASA studies traditional weather prediction methods for climate modeling. The National Weather Service consults tribal elders whose ancestors tracked atmospheric patterns for millennia. Even Silicon Valley companies examine indigenous communication networks for inspiration on decentralized systems. These weren't primitive people struggling against nature. They were sophisticated engineers, scientists, and storytellers who turned winter from humanity's greatest challenge into their finest achievement. The next time you see snow falling, remember Butterfly in her warm earth lodge, Iku building his life-saving igloo, and Ayana keeping her baby safe with knowledge passed down through generations. They didn't just survive winter, they conquered it. The ancestors didn't just endure, they thrived in conditions that would challenge our best modern technology. If these incredible survival innovations amazed you, smash that like button and subscribe for more untold stories of human ingenuity. What winter survival technique surprised you most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. Until next time, stay curious, stay warm, and remember, our ancestors were far more brilliant than we ever imagined. Oh, and in the next video, we're answering a question you never thought you'd Google. What was it like wiping your butt in Native American times? Trust me, it's more fascinating than you think, and probably cleaner than you'd guess. You need to see this.